Good afternoon, Jamaica. Good afternoon, New York. We're on Bridge 99 here in Kingston, Jamaica. We're on Irish Jam in New York. This is Jamaica Live. I'm Bruce Golding. We do this every Monday. We talk about issues that we think are important to us as a people, as a nation. Today is the 22nd of May. And end of this month, of course, we're going to begin the hurricane season, so the year is moving quite stridently. But we're good. Jamaica is confronting its problems, but all things considered, we're doing okay. But we want to focus today on an issue that we think is important. We try to do this every Monday. We pick an issue. We're a single issue program. We take one issue each week. We try to delve into it as deeply as we can. We try to get the views of people who we think can help us to understand those issues as a means of helping us, all of us, me, you, to come to some considered, thoughtful opinions on those issues. This is Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. We're on Irish Jam in New York. The high cost of energy is a problem that has bedeviled us for a long time. It is not just the high light bills that plague us each month. It affects the economy because it drives up the cost of producing goods and services, and therefore it weighs down our competitiveness, our ability to produce goods at a cost that can enable us to export those goods and earn foreign exchange, or to produce goods for ourselves, for local consumption, at a cheaper price than the cost that can be imported, from abroad. And in doing that, we would say foreign exchange. And either way, our ability to create jobs for our people and growth for our economy is in the balance. Oil, which is what we use to produce most of our energy, is expensive. And it is kept expensive by the cartel of oil-producing countries called OPEC. We have made some headway in finding alternative sources of energy, like wind and solar. There were high expectations some years ago that the introduction of LNG would further substantially reduce the cost of electricity and our dependence on oil. But we are yet to see that significant decrease in the cost of electricity, and perhaps that should be the subject of a Jamaica Live discussion, which we will perhaps program at some time. Very recently, the government announced that consideration is being given to introducing nuclear energy in Jamaica as part of our energy mix. This is the Minister of Energy and Technology, the Honorable Darrell Vaz, speaking in Parliament 2 weeks ago.
Madam Speaker, I now move to what could be a controversial issue if it is not explained properly. And that is what I'm going to try to do as a start to a public conversation that will continue and consultations. Madam Speaker, there's a popular maxim that says, whenever there's a shift in the dominant source of energy, there's also a shift in economic power. Right now, there's a shift occurring away from fossil fuels, which continue to cause enormous harm to mankind and our planet. Experts agree that our current trajectory in carbon emissions is unsustainable and will lead to disastrous consequences. And that shift is moving towards nuclear energy, which is the cleanest and safest energy source available globally. Recent geopolitical concerns, such as Russia's war with Ukraine and the OPEC oil production cuts, have intensified the pace of the global nuclear renaissance that the world is undergoing today. Countries around the world are in increasing agreement that deployment of nuclear energy is the most effective way to enable them to create energy security, address their increased electrification needs arising out of expanding populations, and reduce their carbon footprint. Furthermore, experts agree that nuclear energy will be the only way for the countries to move to net zero carbon, as nuclear energy is the only source that can serve as baseload power for countries to make that transition. As a result, many countries are now accelerating their peaceful nuclear energy programs and amid today's nuclear renaissance. If Jamaica does not join the rest of the world in pursuit of building its own nuclear energy capabilities, once again we will be left behind. Historically, large nuclear plants have been in reach of only a handful of countries given the cost, complexity, and the time associated with undertaking these mega infrastructure projects. Even in the case of Jamaica, and I am happy that the Prime Minister is here, because nuclear is his new buzzword, and he has given me certain instructions. Given these challenges, the nuclear industry has accelerated its effort to introduce small modular reactors and micro modular reactors, which are significantly cheaper, safer, and quicker to build and deploy. Several proven technologies in SMRs and MMRs are quickly being commercialized to enable countries to make the transition to nuclear energy. This now opens the possibility of introducing nuclear energy in Jamaica. The broad applications of SMRs are particularly interesting, as they can be used to produce grid power for small and remote communities, heat energies for industries, and hydrogen as a clean fuel source. Additionally, these smaller cost-effective reactors can be added incrementally to match energy demand without the financial burden of constructing a large nuclear power plant. It is important for us to recognize the broader benefits of incorporating a cost-competitive energy source, such as nuclear energy, as our dominant source of energy. The opportunities that it can present in terms of creation of new industries, employment and economic growth, and the overall well-being of Jamaicans can be enormous. Making Jamaica competitive is not unprecedented. The rise of the business process and outsourcing industry in Jamaica and the profound impact it has had on our economic growth is a case in point. In order for the industry to flourish, the price of telecommunication products and services had to be drastically lowered and made consistent. We achieved this cost competitiveness by significantly truncating the price of data products through the expansion of Columbus communications. Much in the same way, reducing the cost of energy in Jamaica will lead to the introduction of new industries, especially energy-intensive industries, which will enable employment and economic growth for Jamaica. Therefore, it's vital for Jamaica to timely realize the benefits of nuclear energy and pursue this as a national priority for our country. This requires us to immediately develop a national roadmap to identify the barriers and actions needed to accelerate the development of our peaceful nuclear energy program.
Minister Vaz introduced the topic by saying that it was likely to be controversial. Controversial is right. The mere thought of a nuclear plant in Jamaica causes some consternation because of the risks involved. You know, we can recall the nuclear disasters at Chernobyl in Ukraine, Fukushima in Japan, and 3 Mile Island in the United States. Nuclear plants are most often built in remote locations, far away from populated areas, in order to minimize the risks in the event of a meltdown. We don't have any such location in Jamaica. So how would we mitigate those risks? Listen to Dr. Chuck Johnson, the director of a joint task force on the dangers of nuclear energy in Oregon.
There are two main reasons why nuclear power is something that we oppose in terms of both safety and the long-term health consequences. And one is the potential for a large-scale accident, as we've seen in a couple of cases. The problem is that nuclear power has to work well 100% of the time. As nuclear engineer Arnie Gunderson, who's become a nuclear critic, likes to say, you can have 30 good years with nuclear power and then one bad day. And that one bad day can release hundreds of dangerous radionuclides into the environment. An even greater danger is the spent nuclear fuel that's stored next to these reactors. If we had an accident that released that material, you could have several cores worth of radioactive material released into the environment, which would be the worst case scenario for a nuclear accident. The other danger that we see as being really significant is the long-term storage of that waste, because it remains intensely physically and radioactively hot for a very long time. To give an illustration, exposure to a single fuel assembly, of which there are hundreds in a nuclear power plant, for 7 seconds after a year of removal from a reactor would give a worker a fatal dose.
7 seconds.
7 seconds.
Wow.
After 10 years, that's increased to a little over a minute. But that's 10 years later. You think something would cool down within 10 years. Yes, it has cooled down, but it's still intensely hot. Even after 100 years, that same fuel assembly would give a worker a fatal dose in a little over 12 minutes. So even 100 years later, working around unshielded high-level radioactive waste is extremely dangerous.
There are currently 439 nuclear power plants throughout the world. The United States has the largest number, 92. But there are 29 other countries with at least one, including France, that has 56, China, which has 54 nuclear plants, Russia, 37, and Japan, 33. There have been 28 nuclear accidents since the first nuclear plant was built in Pennsylvania 66 years ago. And a total of 44 people were killed in those accidents. But you know, if you look at numbers, That is less than what the number of persons who were killed last year from an explosion at a container depot in Bangladesh, and a little more than than the numbers that were killed last year from an explosion caused by a gas leak at a hotel in Cuba. Of course, we must not overlook the cancer-related effects that exposure to nuclear radiation can cause for many, many years after the incident actually occurs. The other issue is that in the past, nuclear plants had to be large, producing a lot of energy, far more than we could need or we could ever use. So it would not be a viable option for a small country such as ours. In recent times, however, technology has changed that. Designs have been developed for small nuclear plants, what is called small modular reactors, that produce less than 300 megawatts of electricity. These are modular plants so that they can be operated individually or they can be stacked together. Jamaica's electricity requirements are just under 1,100 megawatts. So conceivably, 3 of these plants, along with our renewables like wind and solar, could satisfy our needs. It is also argued that these small modular units involve less risks and are much safer than the traditional large nuclear plants. Let's hear some views on that.
Small nuclear reactors are not a new concept. The world's superpowers have been using them to power naval vessels safely for millions of miles, both on and under our seas and oceans, since the 1950s. Back on terra firma, governments have traditionally gone for massive-scale centralised nuclear facilities with multi-decadal construction times and often with very heavy budget overruns. According to this Forbes article, the average cost of constructing a nuclear plant had reached $11 billion by 2018. These things take up a huge amount of land, and that limitation, coupled with the fact that the majority of citizens are instinctively worried about their safety, has meant that nuclear power stations have had to be located well away from big cities, and that adds even more cost for high voltage power cables to take the electrical supply to where it's needed. Nuclear power is one of the safest forms of energy available alongside wind, solar and hydropower. So in very recent years there's been something of a reconsideration of the role that nuclear power might need to play in our energy mix if we really are going to go cold turkey on our fossil fuel addiction. In an assessment report published in May 2019 by the International Energy Agency, their Executive Director Dr. Fatih Birol said this: "If governments don't change their current policies, advanced economies will be on track to lose 2/3 of their current nuclear fleet, risking a huge increase in CO2 emissions. Wind and solar energy need to play a much greater role in order for countries to meet sustainability goals, but it is extremely difficult to envisage them doing so without help from nuclear power." The International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, defines small nuclear as under 300 megawatts compared to a traditional full-size nuclear installation which can produce the equivalent of up to 1,600 megawatts of power. Enthusiasts of small modular reactors point out that as well as a much smaller footprint, SMRs also have better safety, faster build times and a unit cost somewhere between $800 million and $3 billion compared to the $11 billion we just looked at. There are currently about 50 different designs and concepts for SMR technology being developed all over the world. SMR technology in general has several attractive selling points. The WNA say that because of the small size and modularity of SMRs, they could be almost completely fabricated in factories and then transported and installed as modular and possibly even pre-fueled components. And that strategy will build in significant cost efficiencies and quality improvements in the tightly controlled factory production line environment. They also point to passive safety features that they say would make SMR technology attractive to countries with less experience of nuclear power. And that term passive safety refers to systems and procedures that don't require active intervention by an operator or any kind of elaborate shutdown mechanism that could fail if it lost electrical power. Instead, these SMR reactors would work in such a way that they could take advantage of natural forces like gravity or buoyancy, pressure differences, conduction or natural heat convection, all of which would cause the nuclear reaction to slow down rather than speed up in the event of an accident or loss of power. And as well as greater safety, those simpler systems mean less cost and fewer operatives on site. And smaller reactors, say the WNA, mean a smaller radioactive inventory, with the implication that the construction would be inherently safer and there would be less nuclear waste produced. They point out that many designs are being developed for underground or underwater locations, providing greater protection against natural disasters like earthquakes or tsunamis, and man-made disasters like lunatics in hijacked aircraft. The very fact that SMRs are modular and small means that multiple units could be installed on the same site, and the reduced need for cooling water would make SMRs suitable for more remote regions. Some developers predict that by 2030 SMRs could be cost competitive with natural gas combined cycle plants or NGCCs. Forbes points out that current estimates for levelized cost of electricity from SMRs are around $100 per megawatt hour, while NGCCs are in the $55 to $85 per megawatt hour range. In 10 years, though, SMR costs could drop below $65 per megawatt hour, putting them on par with cheap gas and renewable energy.
SMRs or small modular reactors or any reactor that has a power output of 300 megawatts electric or less. So our design is a 77 megawatt electric reactor, and each of those modules is able to work with other modules. So we can put them in arrangements of 4, 6, or 12 to produce different power outputs depending on what the customer needs.
Now, small reactors aren't entirely new. In fact, they were being designed as far back as the 1950s, mostly for submarines and big aircraft carriers. Where things are different this time is in the modular design. A 60 megawatt reactor, for example, might not be enough to power the thing you want it to on its own, say for instance a large city. But you could order more than one, stack them together and get as much power as you need. They're also portable enough to go pretty much anywhere. Now, before you go digging a bunker in your backyard, these units are designed to be far safer than their predecessors. Because the cores of SMRs are much smaller, they generate less heat and there are far fewer moving parts to worry about. They've got clever safety features too.
So for our design, under the worst case conditions, the reactors will safely shut themselves down without any operator action, without any AC or DC power, and they'll remain cooled for an unlimited period of time without the need to add water. So that's a first for commercial nuclear power, and it makes it extremely resilient and extremely safe.
Hoping to solve the problems of cost and scale, this new nuclear fleet are called SMRs, or small modular reactors.
Small in this context just means it's producing less than 300 megawatts of electricity. The plants that were being built in South Carolina and the ones that are being built in Georgia generate about 1,100 megawatts of electricity.
Modular means that you can make these things in a factory. You're manufacturing all your high quality components. In parallel, you're doing all your civil construction on site. So you're making the pool, you're building the buildings. And then when the buildings are done, you transport the modules to the site and you install them.
Beyond these two, there is really nothing that constrains you about the design of the reactor. So there are literally dozens and dozens of SMR designs.
So this all started with a project that was funded by the Department of Energy. Back in 2000, we were working with the Idaho National Laboratory at the time, and we came up with this concept for something small that could be built in a factory. So inside our modules, we start off with the containment vessel. It's about 76 feet long and 15 feet in diameter, so it's a big cylinder. Inside that containment vessel, the reactor vessel houses the fuel, the steam generator, it's a helical coil steam generator, and everything you need for power producing of steam is inside that one little vessel. Now the containment and the reactor vessel sit underwater below ground, and you can add 1, 2, 3, up to 12 modules in a single pool. So it's scalable because you don't have to add them all at once. You can do them in increments. Each module will produce about 60 megawatts electric. If you think about homes, it's somewhere around 50,000 homes would be powered by one module.
A key element NuScale really emphasized with us is safety.
Passive safety really describes the ability to perform a safety function without power. For our design, the reactors will safely shut themselves down without any operator action or computer action, without any AC or DC power, and they'll remain cooled for an indefinite period of time without the need to add water. When you lose power, the control rods actually fall into the reactor vessel, into the core, and they're held up normally by electromagnets. So you lose power, they disengage, and they fall. So you go from 200 megawatts thermal to about 10 or 11 megawatts in a second or so.
Those are some views on the new technology, the new designs for small modular nuclear reactors, which are being offered, being promoted as a means by which small countries like Jamaica could engage with nuclear energy production as an important transformation of our electricity production. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Today is a kind of special day because we're going to be interrupted by some horse racing activities. So my engineer will signal me whenever he's ready to break. But can we proceed until you're ready? Yeah, Beauregard.
Good afternoon, Mr. Golden.
What happened, big man? How you doing?
I'm here, sir, recuperating from the weekend once again.
And what happened over the weekend?
I'm just enjoying life, you know.
And when you enjoy life, you have to recuperate.
Yes, sir.
I follow you. You need
unwinding and things of that nature.
You need to pack a grip and go back home. You don't have them problems down here.
Soon forward, soon. But when I get there, I know I'm going to need to recuperate after coming back from there even more.
Man.
You know?
Yeah, man. Wholly for fun and activity here.
Definitely.
Nice to hear. What's the weather like up there?
We're in the 70s today, sir.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, it feels nice today. The sun is peeking out and, some nice cool breeze, and it feels good.
That's good, but then you're so unpredictable that next week when I talk to you, you may tell me you're down in the 40s.
Yeah, well, this weekend is Memorial Weekend here, so normally after Memorial Weekend, we can look forward to summer weather fully.
Yes, okay. All right, Bo, nice to hear you.
You too, sir.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to deal with some horse racing activity now, and then we come back to talk about nuclear energy. We're talking about nuclear energy today, and our first guest is someone whose insight into these matters I really want to share with you. He's Dr. Dennis Minott, who is a noted Jamaican scientist, perhaps noted more for his excellent work with mathematics students. AQuest, I think, is his outfit. But he does some really excellent work honing mathematics skills among our students. But he's a scientist. I mean, that's what he is. And I'm very pleased to have him on to give us his perspective on the prospects of Jamaica going to a nuclear solution for our energy needs. Dr. Dennis Minott, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowling.
I'm so glad to have you on. You have written a couple of articles on this matter. You have some concerns about the suggestion that nuclear ought to be an option that we consider. Share them with us.
Well, I have a thought in mind as I was listening to the promotional advertisements relating to NMRs that were played in the first 15-20 minutes of this program. A Jamaican saying goes like this: "Mouth make me say anything." Sadly, because of my training and activities in this field, I can think critically about it. And because of my experience, I know a lot of the places myself. First and foremost, notice the language of all of those that were speaking. They speak of designs. They speak about meltdown. They speak about will. They don't speak about operating. And they don't speak about radiation. They focus attention on Fukushima and by extension the plant in Russia, Ukraine that melted down, and they barely touched on 3 Mile Island. Now let me say this. I know, because of the work I have done with UNIDA for many years, I know a thing or two about energy. I worked as a consultant in the Philippines to Philippine Electric. I am very familiar with the electricity grid and its arrangements in Manila, Metro Manila area, across Manila Bay, across Bataan, right up to Subic Bay, that vast American, or used to be American harbor for many vessels, including nuclear submarines and flat tops or aircraft carriers.
What are the dangers? What are the dangers that we ought to be concerned about?
The issues that we should be concerned about is, first of all, they have a small reactor there that is often touted as being a small reactor in power reactor.
How small is it?
In an island, in a set of islands.
How small is it?
It is 5 megawatts.
That's all?
That is all. And not just that. It is operational, but it is not operating. Note the difference in words. Operational, but not operating.
When was that built, Dennis?
It was built 40 years ago.
Yeah, but the technology then would be vastly different from what it is today, no?
But no operating technology. Operating, meaning tied into the grid and supplying commercial energy, is taking place anywhere else in the world below 300 megawatts, except in a remote plant in 6,000 kilometers from Moscow, and a remote plant in Shandong province, next to a nuclear reactor site.
But based on the new technology and the new designs, aren't we likely to see a lot of these SMRs being built in various parts of the world over the next, say, decade or so?
Not so, Mr. Golding. There is great resistance by governments. Let me start with where the most stringent resistance to this is. In Canada, there have been many attempts to get a small reactor licensed in Ontario for even remote situations. Both the federal government and the Ontario government have shut it down.
Why?
Because it is not remote enough. The technology might work, but it is expensive technology, and the cost of the electricity from it will be higher than anything known in Canada.
Well, hold for me, Dennis. I want to bring in now Dr. Professor Charles Grant, who is the Director General at the International Center for Environmental and Nuclear Sciences at the University of the West Indies. Many people don't know that we have had a nuclear reactor in Jamaica for many, many years. Not an energy-producing one. It's a little baby, a little tiny little something, which is used more for research and so on. But it has certainly given us an opportunity to develop an appreciation for what its potential might be for wider uses than the university has so far been operating it for. Professor Grant, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Golding, and good afternoon also, Dr. Minott.
I want to get your perspective. When I read the material over the weekend, when I was preparing for this program, and I read the material that was available to me, including a number of articles that Dennis has produced, I ended up in a little confusion because, in one sense, I got an impression that, hey, nuclear, which was certainly far outside of our reach and our capability many years ago, seems now to be within our grasp. But then Dennis is saying, hey, not so fast. Where do you come down on this?
So let me start off with the idea of and the fears of the larger reactors that Dr. Minott has mentioned. Those are true. My thing is, or my take on this now, is that the smaller designs, just by their very nature of the design, the size and so on, the safety concerns are not quite the same. You have to, of course, have concerns, but we must also wait and see what these things can actually deliver. I think a lot of speculation now about what it will be is maybe not the best thing right now. Let us see what is delivered. And to say that these things won't be built, I think is not correct either. There are, in fact, over 80 designs right now. Jamaica is actually part of an International Atomic Energy Agency project, which includes over 60 countries. All of the major developed economies are involved in it, and a number of developing countries are also looking at this. So I think this is something that we have to take seriously and take a proper look at it.
Are there any of these small plants that are in operation now that we could kind of look at and see how they perform?
I think Dr. Minott had mentioned too, the one in Russia, the KLT-40, which was basically a reactor that they used to use on icebreakers, is operational in Russia, and the one in China. I am not sure what their commercial outlooks are, so I can't really speak too much to that. But I can say that the designs in the States, NuScale has been given approval to build. They've been licensed to go ahead. And in Canada, in fact, they are pushing quite hard and hope to have a demonstration unit by, I believe, 2027. So things are happening. So it is worthwhile watching the space.
The dangers, the risks involved in having a nuclear reactor sitting down somewhere in Jamaica. Is that as frightening as it was 20 years ago, or has the technology sought to address some of those issues?
It's certainly not as dangerous as the larger plants were. And to put it in perspective, reactors started small and then got big. They believe through the scales of economy, you made them larger, that the kilowatt hour price would go down. Now, the other side of the coin for that is that you're now generating huge amounts of heat energy in a relatively small volume. That is where the danger is, because in the event that you lose your active cooling, the decay heat, the immediate heat after you immediately shut down the reactor, is sufficient to melt the fuel. So it's a physics problem. So by making the reactor smaller, increasing the surface area to volume ratio, when the reactor shuts down immediately, and that 10% of decay heat that's left there immediately is simply not sufficient to melt the fuel. So it's the same process, but just looking at it from a different philosophy. They tend to get their scales of economy by producing many of them, like the Model T4, the Henry Ford principle of the supply line. You make many things quickly, and that reduces the cost, and that therein would lie the savings in the energy generation. But it will need multiple of them being made.
Dennis, let me get your response to that, and when you respond, tell me as well, if not nuclear, what? because we don't have enough wind in Jamaica to meet any significant portion of our requirements. Solar is not going to cut it. LNG is, as far as I'm concerned, is a twin sister of crude oil. What should we be looking at in terms of our energy needs over the next 50 years?
Could I ask you to, Mr. Golding, could I ask you to look at a February 22 figure on the new scale power plant proposed for a spot in California, which I have up on the screen. I don't know if you can see the screen.
No, I'm not seeing it.
Let's see now. You're going to allow me to, you might have to.
What I'm thinking is your image.
Oh no, that's nuclear enough for me to remove it. Now, nuclear.
Tell us about it.
First of all, nuclear is compared to solar, wind, nuclear. The average nuclear plant per megawatt is proposed to cost over $8 million United States dollars per megawatt installed. So a 20 megawatt installed plant at present projections will cost 20 times 8, 160 million US dollars. A solar plant, on the other hand, of equivalent 20 megawatts would cost in the region of 20 times 2 million at most, more likely 1,500. 1.5 million US dollars per megawatt. So that would be 30 million US dollars. And wind is going down, but Jamaica does not have a high wind regime. I grant that. But nuclear is going up and up and up. And because of this, there are only two operating, as distinct from operational. There are only two small-scale nuclear plants operating in the world right now. One is in the most remote area of Russia. On a high hill, you can see across the straits, the Bering Straits, into Alaska. That's how far it is. 6,000 kilometers from Moscow, and about 1,500 kilometers from Anchorage in Alaska. The other one is in Shandong province, a province with which I am quite familiar, having worked in China. Again, the one in Russia, the one in Shandong, both of them stick out in the sea, way out. Yes, Shandong province has about 120 million people, a vast province by population in China, but the peninsula is highly militarized, same as it is in the Chukotka Peninsula in Russia, well, I should say, on Russian territory. No other nuclear plant of that size is operating, and for good reason. Yes,
is that good reason? Not because it's early days yet. Isn't this something that we're on the cusp of?
No, we're not on the cusp of it, sir. None of those plants, for example, Ling Ling in Shandong, could be reproduced. It's also called ACP 100. for obvious promotional reasons, African, Caribbean, and Pacific. The China Nuclear Energy Commission is promoting it in African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. Not one has taken it up. In addition, Rosatom in the Chukotka Peninsula, just across from Alaska. Rosatom is promoting something that a billionaire named Abramovich, when he was a legislator and a billionaire, operating on behalf of that peninsula, he took his own money and had Rosatom and other interests build a 250 megawatt commercial plant. It has worked well, but what is their alternative? Their alternative was to continue on coal. Their alternative was to continue trying with wind.
Yeah, but if it had worked well, what's the relevance of the alternatives? Can I ask you both, Dennis and Charles? Can I ask you both to? Can you spend some more time with me? I need to take a break, but I'd love to continue this discussion.
Sure, I'm willing.
All right,
sure.
let's take a break. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about nuclear energy, whether or not that is an appropriate option for Jamaica to consider. We have online scientist Dr. Dennis Minott. We have online as well Professor Charles Grant, who is the Director General at our Nuclear Science Center in Jamaica, the International Center for Environmental and Nuclear Sciences. And we're going to be joined as well in this segment by Dr. Charah Watson, who is the Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council, so that we're going to make this discussion even more robust. But Charles, I wanted to get your response to what Dennis had said. Do you share that skepticism?
No. And the fact is, this new technology over the last 10 years has really been getting a lot of attention, and there's been a lot of investment in it. I understand the skepticism of the old designs, and I too wish to see them in operation before saying that Jamaica definitely must. We have to see these things operate safely and securely. So I'm all for caution, but I'm also all for sharing facts and not too much speculation about something that we have not yet seen. I mean, the idea that you mentioned, what if, what else? So we're looking at solar, we're looking at wind, and as both of you have said, it's not sufficient to really run and keep the nation ahead in the future for the fourth industrial revolution, which is going to be pretty energy intensive. If we continue the way we're going now, so we say we have all the solar we need, we all know the intermittent nature of both wind and solar. So that means you have to have spinning capacity in the background. Right now, so we're burning energy, although it's not under load, the plants are still running to be there for backup. So you're still generating greenhouse gases. So to me, to say not to look at nuclear down the road, to me, is not correct. I mean, things change, things develop. And I'm sure that the way the technology is going now is that you put safety first before cost, and then try and reduce costs by mass production. So that's where the idea is now. So I know the first units that they build are going to be incredibly expensive, as all research and development is. But it is my belief, with the amount of interest, the number of countries that are involved in this project that Jamaica is also involved in with the International Atomic Energy Agency, is that there will be uptake, and that in itself will help drive the cost down. And the other thing with solar too,
just cut in here. I feel, Professor Grant, let me say this. I deal with specific things. I have to. The most energy intensive big things around the world that we could be having our eyes on right now is not generating light or running motors for industry in Jamaica. It would be for server farms, for running the fourth industrial revolution which is a digital-driven revolution. That is where the energy is needed.
Yes,
there
I
are
agree.
vast needs. I'm sorry. There are vast needs for that. For example, Apple, the great Apple, according to work that I've checked and double-checked and triple-checked, and thank God for artificial intelligence, Apple has sworn off anything else but renewables. And they have 398.3 megawatts. As a matter of fact, I double-checked, they have now gone up to 666 megawatts of entirely renewable energy for their server farms.
Yeah, but their operation then is don't need no heavy equipment. They don't have to. They don't have to concern themselves with steel mills and so on.
Like the smooth power that we need from a nuclear plant. Yes, we get smooth power from a nuclear plant, but those nuclear plants are located far, far away from, and the word uses remotely. The newest one that is even near to completion is, I think it's called Cardem in Argentina, 35 to 50 miles away from Buenos Aires, behind many hills.
I've actually been there, Dr. Minott. I have been to that plant. I know it. It's called Karen.
Dennis.
Correct, that's right.
Dennis.
Yes, sir.
I'm 75 years old. Man, your brain is getting as fossilized as mine, you know.
No. Not in this era, because it's not a quest that is my thing. But I don't want to talk about my thing right now. I want to talk about the reality of nuclear plants.
Well, let me bring Charah.
Thank you, Mr. Gully. Thank you for letting me in. Putting a female perspective into the conversation.
Charah, I mean,
yes.
Nuclear. Is this something that we should be afraid of, like poison?
I don't think it should be fair. I think it should be respected. Like most things that we have gotten accustomed to, for example, hurricane, before we now know how to manage and deal and have enough information about them, how they function, how to predict and how to build our buildings, we were very fearful, but now we're extremely respectful of hurricanes. It's the same with nuclear. I think there's a lot of skepticism around it, a lot of ignorance, a lot of just fear, because when we think nuclear, we think what has happened in Japan. We see the
meltdown and radiation
always,
and them something.
Exactly, it's always along that context. But we have to be mindful. We have to be mindful of.
Let Charah finish her point.
Yeah. So we have to be mindful of available information, available technology, where we are. And the conversation that we're having right now is really just a question. Is nuclear an option for Jamaica? So it's answering those questions, seeing what it means. If it is an option, what will that look like? How to ensure that this country is here 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now? It's not something we will be going down to say energy cost is high, so we must have nuclear. That's not the discussion. At all.
Can I prevail on the three of you? Don't leave me. But we have to take a break. We have to look at horse racing business. But beg you, stay with me for a few minutes. I'm going to tell the horses must run fast.
Okay.
Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. We're talking about nuclear energy today, whether or not that is something that Jamaica should seriously contemplate. We have online with us scientist Dr. Dennis Minott. We have as well Professor Charles Grant, and we have as well Dr. Charah Watson. Dr. Watson is the Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council, and Professor Grant is the Director General of ICENS, that's the International Center for Environmental and Nuclear Sciences at the University of the West Indies. Dennis, tell me, 10 years from now, are we likely to see a lot of small modular reactors built in various countries across the world? And if we remain cynical about it, is there a possibility that we may be left behind? Part of our problem, you see, is that we find it difficult, not only because of energy costs, but energy costs is one of the issues. We find it difficult to compete not only in the export market, but on our own supermarket shelves. And it seems to me that if we were able to make a significant breakthrough in terms of the cost of energy, it may shift that line of competitiveness, may shift it in our favor. Should we not keep an open mind, which is what I believe Charah is suggesting? Should we not keep an open mind on it and watch it and see and continue to evaluate it, look at the experience of some of those that may have jumped ahead of us, and see how it works to see whether or not it's something that we ought to take on board?
I really want to answer to the point. Mr. Goling, the answer is that in 10 years' time, we are not likely to see any small nuclear plant in Jamaica, not because of politics for or against, but because not one of them, apart from in extremely remote places, like those places I named before.
Why does it have to be remote, Dennis?
Radiation and the storage of radiation, which is always there, and this, so you need a certain clear space. And also, what do you do with the nuclear waste? And also, how do you use the heat commercially? Because for every 1 kilowatt of energy generated, you get 3 or 4 kilowatts of energy going as heat in the cold north.
Yes.
In the cold parts of China. That makes some sense. And you can have a trade-off between some amount of safety and the convenience of having heat in winter, as well as lights. And people will pay for it. This is what they did. Again, they have the value of land space and remoteness and place to put nuclear waste. In fact, they even produce their own nuclear fuel.
But Dennis, isn't that what science and technology is about? To make things that didn't seem feasible 10 years ago very feasible today?
I have a problem, see, Mr. Golding. I took the same course that the International Atomic Energy Agency took. I'm one of 2 Caribbean persons who were given that same course by Dr. Theo Agard and a certain Professor Paris of the UWI, who taught us nuclear energy and what to look for. I also know why Puerto Rico had, for a time, a small nuclear reactor and got rid of it, and I can explain why. The answer is I don't think it's likely to happen. I think there will not be any recouping of the kind of earnings people will. Because, for example, a small nuclear modular reactor requires the same number of physicists, roughly speaking, as a large one. It's the same number of nuclear engineers as a large one. Not as many operators. Almost the same number of firefighters. No, we cannot, if we are generating 20, 50, 60 megawatts of power, 300 megawatts of power, afford to keep 3 nuclear physicists on call 24/7. The same thing with the nuclear engineers, probably even more. Less with the case of the nuclear operators. As a big plant.
Charles,
because the hazards have not changed.
Charles, Dennis is suggesting to me that maybe we should declare your job redundant.
No, it's a different kind of operation he has. He's a chemist, basically.
I know, but we're hoping that he's the precursor of bigger things to come.
No, it can't be. It has no relationship at all to what we're talking about, Doctor. I'm sorry, Mr. Golding. It's irrelevant. It's like
let me hear Professor Grant.
Manipulation of a Rubik's cube.
Let me hear Professor Grant.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Prof.
Is Professor Grant still with us?
Yeah, I'm hearing him.
I'm not hearing him.
You're a little low, Prof. You have to project a little more.
A lot of the facts that are being stated here are not so. Are simply not so. I am also an expert for the International Atomic Energy Agency. I was at a meeting with some of the manufacturers and users of nuclear power around the world. There were 60 of us there. The biggest problem, the number of physicists and engineers you need, that's not the issue. It's the people that operate the reactor. These reactors are being designed not to use the same amount of people as you do for a power reactor. It's simply not true for the conventional designs. And then the other thing that you look at, you've been mentioning with the footprint of solar. To get the same megawatt energy out of a solar area, the footprint you need is 100 times that of nuclear, right? These small modular reactors are being designed to be nearer to centers of population. They're out in the wild right now because they're in the design phase. But that is not the long-term philosophy. The long-term philosophy is that they will be able to be sited near cities and so on. So those ideas, although correct for large power reactors, are not the philosophy upon which these SMRs are being designed.
Charah, help me out.
Yes.
Help me out. I'm not a scientist. That was not my... I stayed far from them in high school. No? My background really is in public policy.
Right.
And whenever I approach an issue, and when I was in office, whenever I sat with people who were far smarter than I was, I kept an open mind. I wanted to be persuaded that this makes sense and that doesn't make sense. What unnerved me many times was when, from the outset of the discussions,
right,
the thing was polarized. You know, you had people who were saying that this is the way to go, and some people were saying, you're damn crazy, you can't go that way.
Exactly, yes.
And I found myself in difficulty trying to see if I could find...
To make any decision or, you know?
Yeah, because the views were so stridently expressed. Where do we come down on this issue?
So the truth of it, or the reality of it, is like most things, and this is what fundamental science is. You go based on the quality of the data that you have at the time. What we know right now is that we are far away from having any kind of nuclear power application in Jamaica or small island developing state. We know that. However, we also acknowledge that there is a huge energy crisis globally, not just in our states that don't develop, that don't have fuel and have to pay excessive amount that is stifling our economy. We know we have to be looking at alternatives. The renewables are the first one that we have tackled, because yes, we have a lot of sunshine, maybe not enough to drive power plants, maybe not enough to run factories, but we have it to take us at least several hours of a day or into the evening. What else is there? So the discussion, or what we are looking at as scientists, how do we solve this problem? What are the critical issues and the fundamental issues that Dr. Dennis is saying is the safety and other consideration in terms of the byproducts that come from a nuclear plant. Those are the exact consideration and questions that are being asked and being trying to answer with solutions to make this thing practical. For us in Jamaica, we have to be at the table with those discussions. So shutting our minds down and saying, no, this will not work for us because there's too much that could potentially go wrong is not the way to go. We might never have nuclear in Jamaica, you know. We might never have it, because when you finish trying to answer those questions and making it safe and make it practical for us, it might just not be feasible. However, we cannot shut ourselves out of the discussions. And it's at this point in time, today, it's too early, based on where they are in developing these smaller modular systems, to say this is definitely a no for Jamaica or this is a definite yes for Jamaica. And this is what we have to appreciate as scientists. Speaking to the public, we have to be able to allow the public to understand what we're saying and to trust what we're saying. And what we're saying is, this is something we have to be considering, but we know what the issues and the concerns are, and they are grave, but Jamaica is involved in the conversation. We will not be left out of the discussion.
One of the things though that gives some girth to Dennis's argument is that I don't know of any small island, small country, that has dabbled in this nuclear activity. As a matter of fact, even within our own Latin American and Caribbean region, the only country that I know that, and I don't know how far they have reached, that is looking at nuclear is Argentina.
It's not a Caribbean island.
So,
I mean, Dennis, maybe on some...
Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico have nuclear power plants that generate electricity.
They do?
Countries. Yes.
Oh, is that right?
That's small.
As Dr. Minott had mentioned, I have worked with some of the engineers that are building the Charah reactor. I know these people quite well. I had just returned from Chile from a meeting with regarding nuclear energy issues yesterday. So there's a lot going on in the region.
Yes.
And with Jamaica's position, especially in the Caribbean, we have always taken leadership where science and technology is concerned. Again, when you talk about the Caribbean. And so we have to be at the forefront of the discussions. We have to be.
Do you know, Charah, Charah and Charles, you two may be the best people to respond. Do you know where the discussion at the governmental level has reached? Minister Vaz spoke about it 2 weeks ago in Parliament. But do you know the track that it is on and who are involved, whether or not we're getting the best brains and the best intelligence to guide us in this discussion?
I can say a little bit about that. So the Prime Minister announced that it's a possibility, just based on the size now, that we can have a discussion about it.
Yes.
So the Minister of Energy, Mr. Vaz, had said he would like to have a roadmap. First thing first, the country will be following the milestone approach by the IAEA, which has 19 essential steps that must be taken. But the first thing of this roadmap is to have public consultations where the facts, as we know them, are presented to the people of Jamaica for them to try to understand what will be involved. I think this is the correct way. It should be open and transparent. Right now, I think the ministry is trying to set up a committee just to do that. I think it will have a very wide stakeholder base. So there will be the naysayers at the table. There will be the environmentalists. There will be everybody that is in Jamaican society will have a say in this. It's not something that can be done undercover.
I'm going to prevail upon the three of you, you know. My producer will give you some time frames, but stay with me because I want to bring into the discussion now the opposition spokesman on energy, Mr. Phillip Paulwell, a former Minister of Energy himself. Phillip, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon to all of you.
Phillip, where do you come down on this thing? Is nuclear energy something that we should not even think about?
Absolutely not. I was the one, if the truth be told, that raised this issue in my sectoral debate in 2008 when a certain person was Prime Minister. Shortly after that, the then leader of the opposition, Most Honorable Portia Simpson Miller, spoke eloquently about the opposition's view that nuclear energy must be an option. And I have in front of me now a Gleaner report quoting the then Prime Minister as rubbishing that suggestion. And even without thinking carefully through it, the Prime Minister then said that this can't work, there's too many environmental issues, and that was the end of that matter.
I wonder which Prime Minister that was.
in the 9th of May, 2009.
Part of our problem is, Philip, is that if we can't even handle solid waste disposal, Dennis will jump into your chest about how you go handle nuclear waste disposal.
Well, I can tell you, because at that time the technology was advancing. So the place where we're at now, where you have very small mobile reactors generating about 45 to 50 megawatts of electricity. And I assure you that after the waste is utilized, which will give you, I think, well over 10 years, that waste can fit in your hand middle, the so-called nuclear waste that you're talking about. And that can be disposed of. There are ways of disposing of it.
Dennis, are you
yes,
on?
Mr. Bowling.
Dennis, deal with Philip for a minute, please.
No, I would rather talk with him. I'd rather talk with him on the sidelines. I agree with much of what he's saying. But, you know, can I take the opportunity to read something that an economist who has been following this matter very closely said to me? I think I sent you a copy of it. He said, I am not clear where the idea that this is a technology ready for deployment in Jamaica came from. I say that just on the readiness of lack of commercial readiness of the technology. It is not commercially ready. And I'll say something.
Dennis,
I need to say something vital here. It's so vital to the good of this country. South Africa, Mr. Golding, under the influence of many people, especially the so-called Gupta brothers, had the government of Thabo Mbeki embark on a nuclear energy development program, which was one of the most advanced in the world. The Gupta brothers, I would say, took a hold of the government of President Zuma and convinced him to keep spending and spending and spending. By the time Zuma was pushed out, the pebble bed reactor design had 6 billion, not million, billion rand already spent on it, which is over, at today's rate, $300 million of taxpayers' money. Not to mention all sorts of other hopes in Southern Africa.
But can I say this though, Dennis? I appreciate your point, you know, and not something that I would dismiss. But the only difficulty I have is this, that certainly any approach that we would make toward nuclear would have to be data-driven. It would have to be experience-driven, yes, based on the experience of other countries. I'm a little concerned.
But that's not what...
I'm a little concerned, though, no, Dennis, that you seem to be saying, wipe it off of your agenda altogether. Don't even think about it. I tend to agree with Phillip that, look, this is something that we need to look at. Let's not rush. I don't want nobody to tell me that I'm going to go build a nuclear plant down in Alligator Pond. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. We saw from 2008, Mitsubishi had started the developmental work on this era, which is a facility that could fit into your bathtub. This is where the technology is at now. I think, I don't have the latest on it, but what was being developed was a facility of about 45, 50 megawatts. Now, Jamaica doesn't need a huge nuclear facility. And I dare say that if you have 4 or 5 of these located in strategic places island-wide to the grid, you'll be able to reduce significantly at 6 cents per kilowatt hour your cost of electricity, and that must be a part of the discussion going forward. Phillip, how do you address the environmental and the public health concerns?
All right, so there are concerns based on the experience of very large reactors. What happened in Chernobyl, what happened in Japan, and so on. Those are few and far in between. But I say to you that if we are talking about these small mobile units, they are far safer. By the way, you know that we have a reactor in Jamaica.
Yeah,
we have a reactor here
campus,
over
yes.
40 years. Yes, yeah. and it will take...
But it's not energy producing, is it?
No, it is not. But it's the same concept. It's the same concept. And Jamaica has been operating this reactor safely.
No, not at all.
Right.
No, I beg to differ with you, Phillip. I beg to differ with you vastly so.
Okay.
May I proceed?
Yes, Dennis, go ahead.
First of all, my concern is not a Chernobyl nor any kind of thing like that. My concern is that small reactors, according to the latest data from the International Atomic Energy Agency, even moderately large reactors in the United States within the period 2014 to now, which is about 9 years, have had over 100 serious, not my words, serious accidents or incidents.
Where you get that from, Dennis?
The International Atomic Energy Agency. I can give you chapter and verse.
But I did some research on it, and I found 28. I found 28 disasters, nuclear disasters, of any magnitude.
But this is not a place for it. The point is, they are not promoting small nuclear reactors. They are always pointing out the difference between operational and operating.
Can I say that that is not correct? That is not correct,
Dr. Minott. Small reactors.
May I interject here?
Yes, Charles, go ahead.
Because that is not correct. I came back from an international meeting in February where the IEA is promoting the safe use and the regulations of these technologies. I said to you earlier, Jamaica is part of that grouping. There are over 60 countries in it. So that is not correct. Simply not correct.
Because you came back from a meeting where it is promoting the safe use.
The IAEA.
Can't have the safe use, doctor. You can't have the safe use, prof, in Jamaica. You can't have the safe regulated use of it because we don't have any proper regulations. We'd still have to go back to the IAEA for regulations, doctor.
But yes, you start somewhere. So this is the beginning of the journey.
But Dennis, I mean, those are prerequisites, but those are not impossibilities.
No,
Phillip?
They're not impossible. But in the context of Jamaica
Phillip?
and the rest of the Caribbean, then there's the other issue.
Phillip, help me out. Is Dennis kind of running short on our capacity?
Yeah, well, what I think, you see, the government is correct in establishing this committee to spend some time to go through all the issues.
Is the opposition involved?
Well, to be fair to Minister Vaz, he has kept me abreast, and it's a matter that should really be placed before the Energy Council, which is a body that comprises all the stakeholders, including myself. And I think once we're able to flesh out the issues, and it's not rocket science anymore, we will be able to come down on a very positive view on this issue. What I will do, I'll ask Minister Vaz to invite Mr. Minott to at least come and do a presentation to the committee.
That would be good.
Yeah.
That would be good. Charah?
Yes.
To what extent would this revolutionize our economic potential? The reason why I ask you that question is because we were told, and Phillip was one of those who was telling us too, that boy, if we got LNG, what a marvelous difference it would make. We have LNG and it don't make one goddamn difference. Are we just talking up this thing too much?
I don't believe we are. The truth is we are not able to compete, as you mentioned earlier. We're not able to compete globally or even within our own market because of the cost of producing any or everything is so expensive. Whether it be due to energy costs, which is a cost in every single production activity.
Charah,
it is limiting us, but it's also, but not just that.
Charah, hold on. Beg you. We have some horses that have to gallop, no?
All right.
Just bear with me for a couple of minutes. I'm going to tell them must just get on the business fast and just run on. Hold for me, all of you. I really want to finish this discussion with all of you. Hold for me. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about nuclear power. We have a very eminent group of persons on the line with us, helping us to understand this issue. We have opposition spokesman on energy, former Minister of Energy himself, Mr. Phillip Paulwell. We have Dr. Charah Watson, the Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council. We have Professor Charles Grant, Director General of the International Center for Environmental and Nuclear Sciences at the University of the West Indies. And we have Dr. Dennis Minott, a noted scientist. Charles, help me out. Nuclear power, small nuclear reactors are not new. I mean, they've been used for a long time to power submarines and aircraft carriers. As a matter of fact, former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson and myself were among a group of persons who had the opportunity to overnight on the USS Eisenhower when it visited Jamaica many, many years ago. Do the records indicate that the kind of concerns, safety concerns that Dennis is highlighting, that those have been encountered with those submarines and those aircraft carriers that use, the smaller version of the nuclear plant?
Right. So there are always going to be safety concerns. But like I said, the whole concept, the whole philosophy behind these smaller plants is that very physics of the situation changes. That you don't have as much energy packed into such a small space. So the issues of meltdowns and so on are really not as large a problem as they are with the larger reactors, which I said went extra large to get the scales of economy to drive down the cost of electricity. However, the downside to that now is that you have to build in extra safety measures to ensure that any of these scenarios with accidents and so on, that you are able to cope with them. And that's why the cost of these plants and the timelines for their construction have gone astronomical, basically.
Philip,
so,
Philip,
yes,
you're satisfied that these risks are manageable?
Well, you just mentioned about the submarine. When President Obama came to Jamaica, and he did come with his energy secretary, we had an exchange because there are many retired submarines that we thought, and we put it in writing to them, could be made available to Jamaica to assist us, because the U.S. at the time, they were concerned about our increase in debt with Petrocaribe and so on, and they wanted to assist us. So we say, yes, you could assist us in this way. And they did study it. They came back not with the issue of the safety of it, but really national security and whether or not we could sufficiently secure the facilities. Right? So just to put that in some context, that we did explore that at one time. I am not overly concerned. Well, I'm not very concerned about the safety issues. I think when we're speaking now, even when we're speaking about small nuclear plants, it's not the same technology that I believe is emerging, which is a mobile facility that I know the Japanese had worked on. I really haven't checked recently, and I really ought to see where they are with that. But it is the size of a bathtub based on what was designed and was being developed, and it could be located at different places, and it's not static.
Well,
meant to be mobile.
I've seen some images of these plants being moved on a flatbed trailer.
Yeah.
Dennis, suppose a nuclear facility. Suppose we had a floating nuclear facility. Would that alleviate any of the concerns that you had?
Slightly. But I have been deliberately holding myself back on the matter of the amount of knowledge of the difference, the vast difference between a nuclear-powered vessel and an on-land or near-shore nuclear plant. May I say definitively, every nuclear vessel, whether it be a submarine or a nuclear-powered flat top aircraft carrier, does not engage its nuclear engines when it is in port of a friendly country or its own country. The issues are almost completely different. Everybody, first of all, who works on those particular power plants within the craft are under military discipline. First point. Second point, there is no shortage of cooling water or coolants when those vessels are way out at sea. Second, the need for power for propulsion in a nuclear-powered vessel is completely different, Mr. Golding. The issues are completely different. There's no connection that we can effectively draw on in terms of a power takeoff from a retired submarine or a retired aircraft carrier. That is, it's not so, Philip. We can talk about it, but it doesn't arise. All those who have ever dreamt of that, the military has, and not just the military, the physicists have said, no, just forget it. You can, for example, a nuclear submarine would never start its nuclear engines in Jamaican waters. And if even you go one time...
Well, they weren't in Jamaican water. They were a little distance out because we had to fly.
But
we had to fly to get on the car, but it wasn't that far out.
No, but hold on. It was running on diesel, or it was drawing power from JPS company.
No, it wasn't drawing power from JPS.
Any engines in port.
What I know is that I've never seen one little ship, well, not a little ship, but I've never seen so many lights on one ship in all my life. But you know,
but it was running on diesel. They have supplementary diesel on these engines.
You may be right. You may be right. I don't know. We're out of time. It's almost 2 o'clock, and that's the end of the program. I want to thank you all for coming, but I want to give Charah the opportunity to give us the benediction.
So, as I said, nuclear energy should be respected, not necessarily feared. And Jamaica, it's critical for Jamaica to be at the table having the discussions to ensure that all consideration that is necessary for our people and our country to ensure that we are sustainable and viable in the future are considered. If nuclear is that, it will be, and everything will be considered. And if it is not, then so it will be.
And it must be data-driven.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can only be fact-driven.
Yeah. I want to thank all of you. Dr. Dennis Minott, scientist, Professor Charles Grant, who is Director General at the International Center for Environmental and Nuclear Sciences at the UWI. I want to thank as well Dr. Charah Watson, Executive Director, Scientific Research Council, and of course my longtime friend, Mr. Phillip Paulwell, who former Minister of Energy, Shadow Minister of Energy now. I want to thank you all for joining me. You have brought value to this discussion, and we perhaps will have to return to it, so please don't change your telephone numbers in the meanwhile. Thank you all very much. That's it for today. It's Jamaica Live. We hope to be back here next week, Monday. Different topic, different set of guests. We try to delve as deeply as we can into these issues to try and see if we can help you, our listeners, to gain a better understanding of these issues that we think are important to us as a nation and as a people. Have a good week, all of you. See you next week, Monday.